We're good? Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm used to say good morning, but now okay. Thank you. All right, plan B. Thanks for coming. And I thought the Theology Forum was something more informal, like we were all down here and talking, but I feel like a little bit intimidated here. But please feel free to make it like informal. If you have any questions, I know there are a period of questions at the end, and usually I just go through the information and then we discuss at the end. So I guess we'll keep that format. It's for YouTube purposes, but I hope that at the end you will have questions and we can exchange and discuss around the biblical perspective around work. So without any further words, let's start with a word of prayer. God, it's your name that we want to lift up because you are the one who is giving us the hope to spend eternity with you, worshiping Jesus, our Savior. We want to thank you because you are a God who builds people up. You are a God who wants to restore the creation and mankind, and you are a God who paid a great price for that. I want to thank you that you sent Jesus to save us from our sins. We were dead in our trespasses, and you sent your Spirit to open our eyes. And now we want to live for you, a life that is gospel-shaped and that you will use to the glory of Jesus, because we owe you everything. It's in his name, our shepherd, that we pray. Amen. All right, so there are slides. You have handouts. Maybe you saw them at the entrance there. This evening, just to set the expectations, we will flip quite a bit in our Bible. I'll try to minimize that, but just to prepare you, we'll go from Genesis to Colossians. We'll come back to Genesis, go to Jeremiah, and things like that. But don't worry, we won't spend an hour doing that. But I think it's for certain things, it's important that we just go to the verse, especially since my English is not that good. It's good to go to the Bible and read the verse. Then I'll make sure you understand. And we can ponder over that and look at the words for what they mean. It provides us, the objective is to provide us with some guidance. So I want to start with the idea about work. It's God's idea. Work didn't come after the fall. It's not a result of sin. We work not because we sin. We work because God works, and we are created in his image. And that's what God did at the beginning. He started working. And also we will look at what happens with work after the fall. And after that, we're on this side of the cross. What happened with work after Jesus come? And we will talk about gospel-shaped work that we are encouraged to have. And I will have 2 slides on businesses, companies, starting business or well-established businesses. We'll think about that and look at with a biblical perspective on why business matters to God. For those of you who have a business, who are thinking about starting one. So the first thing, we're going to turn to Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. And that's where we will see that God, He's the one who had the idea of work. And when we read this verse, Genesis chapter 2, verse 2, you read this. And on the 7th day, so after all the days of creation, God finished His work that He had done. And He rested on the 7th day from all His work that He had done. 2 times He repeats work. Creating was work. But at the end of each day, He said, this was good. So work can be good. And He wants to make it clear that was work. Work here is labor. There's really an effort here. And it was so good that after that, He asked men who was created in His image to do the same thing. And let's look now at Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. So it's not a big, you don't have to turn many pages. It's probably on the same page. Genesis 1, verse 28. And God blessed them, Adam and Eve, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So He's not saying here, put your feet up and be entertained. He's giving them a lot of responsibilities. And multiply, fill the earth, expand beyond the garden, and there have dominion, be a regent, be a manager, be a steward of all my creation. And so He said, work is good. I'm going to ask men and women to work as well. And there was, up to that point, no problem. That was the way it was going. Now, I was surprised because I work with fish, that the first thing He did, have dominion over the fish of the sea. And Adam and Eve were at the junction of a river that split into 4 branches. It's not the sea. It's not the sea there. I don't know if they saw a fish before, but when He's talking about the sea, it can be the Sea of Galilee, a wide surface lake, a big lake, or the ocean. And so, how can I have dominion over the fish? I'm here on land, and they are there in water, in the sea, and probably they never saw a fish before. And also have dominion over the birds. They're flying up there. How do you want me to have dominion over them? So these things asked them to have a lot of ingenuity, relentless effort. How do we get there? How can I be a steward of the fish where I have apparently no control? How do you want me to control that? And the birds in the air, they go where they want. I don't know if they had migration at the time, but these birds, it's hard to have control over them. And so God is kind of giving them responsibilities, but also can be challenging, like it's stretching it's not just look at the apples and just make sure they don't fall on the ground. It's more challenging than that. And so it's a call for expand beyond the garden, but also to have ingenuity and to conquer things that we don't. And so our God is not static, but really He's not on the status quo thing here. I provide you the raw material, the raw resources, now you take it from there and you expand. You multiply, fill the earth, have dominion over these things now. So, it's interesting also that He did not give them a temple. For some reasons, my mind went there. Why didn't He give a temple? And for Him, that was a work that he asked was a garden. And he repeated that. Later, we'll see that in Jeremiah, but he's coming back to the garden quite often, our God, and say, you plant things, you grow things, you don't stay there, you work. And so God did the initial capital investment we will use in our business world, and it's up to us to develop it, take it from there, and expand it, add value. Now, unfortunately, the fall came, you know that, and sin entered the world, and there's something that changed with regards to work. We can have a look at it in Genesis chapter 3, just a few pages away. And first, when sin happened, God cursed two things. The serpent in verse 14, so Genesis chapter 3, verse 14. God cursed the serpent. Cursed are you above all livestock. And in verse 17, he said to Adam, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten the tree of which I command you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground. Oh. But he didn't curse mankind. He didn't curse Adam and Eve. He didn't curse work, but the ground and the serpent. And then work is still good. He didn't say that work became bad. Work is still good, but it's going to be harder. And we can see that today. We don't have to spend a lot of time talking about it. That work can be hard. And I give just a few examples here. If we face reality as it is, work is usually frustrating and harder than we think. And it's hard to reach full potential and to achieve something in the timelines that we have, in the budget, within budget, and all these things. And here I just give a few examples how work is today because of the fall. There will be relational conflicts, and I'm not on the right slide. Here we go. I'm getting old. It looks like I'm talking, but I forget about the other things I need to do. So you see those, it's not bullet points, it's the arrows. Face reality, work will be harder and more frustrating. We will have relational conflicts at work, rivalry, competition. There will be uncertainties, and we know that today. What will happen tomorrow? What will happen with the potato industry if there is that and this and that? There's pressure. I don't know if you are used to work with KPIs, key performance indicator or index, or there are different terminologies that are used to evaluate your performance. But when you have those things, you need to reach this amount of money within 2 semesters or 2 quarters. And you have to reach this net earning after tax. And if you don't meet that budget, you're done. Or you're out. If you don't sell, you don't have a job. So pressure comes into play. Injustice at work. We talk about justice this morning with Luke and Revelation. We see injustice at work. Things will happen that are not fair. And just to quote Bill Gates here, life is unfair, get used to it. It happens, we see that in the workplaces for sure. People who should have promotion don't have it. And others who did not really perform will have promotion. This is just an example. Disappointment, we'll have disappointment at work. Our expectation will be there, but then the reality will remind us that, oh, we won't be able to do that. I thought that by studying in this field and doing this, I would be able to have this salary or this amount of vacation or achieve these things, and then you realize it's not feasible. Unachieved potential, that's the last one here. And I would say that's something that many people experienced. And I remember I read a book of a guy, the title of the book is Finding God, and he mentioned in it that his dad was a brilliant scientist. He could have gone very far into the science world, but because of the wars, First World War, Second World War, he had to stay at the farm and take care of the farm, and then he passed away without any. So he had a lot of potential, couldn't do it, and because of circumstances around us, there's a lot of things that we won't be able to achieve. These are good goals in themselves that we won't be able to achieve. And here's just an example. If I take myself, when we got married, Mary and I, the objective was to finish the master degree, go back to the college where I used to study, her and I, and after 5 years, once I'm permanent, I can take a sabbatical year and I go to study theology for 1 year. That was the plan. I can see her laughing because our plan, the wheels came off. So we had good ideas, good plans, nothing bad in it, but God had another plan. And in our broken world, we're broken, it's sometimes to face these disappointments, it's hard to understand. Say, hey, God, these things were good. We want to do what we thought was a good idea, but God had another plan. And so when these things, after 8 years at the college, I didn't have a permanent position, and then they announced that the program I was teaching in was going to close. Oh, so that changed the plans that changed the trajectory of a whole family, actually. So things change, disappointment, how do we deal with that? And we need to trust, we need the Spirit to make us, to convince us that the best thing to do is to trust God. Otherwise, you just don't understand. Either you avoid asking the question and you just pretend otherwise, or you face reality and you said, well, that's what it is. Many people in the Bible has unachieved potential, and the things turned out a different way they thought, and God was there. That's the thing. God didn't leave the boat. He was there. And so that makes all the difference. Relational conflicts and injustice are things that are hardly, and you can challenge me on that, but hardly addressed at work. Especially when the person doing the conflicts or initiating the conflicts or injustice is the person performing the most, bringing the most revenues, especially in startups and small business, then we will kind of, we'll leave with all these conflicts and because we still have a lot of sales or things like that happening. So that's the danger in a broken world. That's the kind of things we will see, unfortunately. Because of these hardships, Christians may be fired from their workplace or may have to leave the workplace. When things are going against our biblical values, against biblical ethics, for example, you are asked to buy things when you know you won't be able to pay it, but you want the supplier to get things, and you don't tell them that you don't have the possibility to pay them, but you do that for clients that you need to serve and finish the contract. Things like that may happen, and then what you do as a Christian. Or if things happening at work are not professional at all, it can be harassment, intimidation, or other more subtle things, bullying, that are destructive and really destroy teams, and nothing is being done either by HR, human resources, or by the leaders in place. That things become very toxic. What do you do as a Christian? I think it's a case by case, but in some cases, you may have to leave your job. And I wonder how prepared we are for that. First, as individual, if I need to leave my job tomorrow, how much time can I live without a salary? If it's 2 weeks, 1 month, then I'm kind of attached and very dependent. It will be hard for me to leave my job. But if I have few months or a year of a cushion or a buffer that if I need to leave my job, I have this flexibility. I can handle that and look somewhere else. That's making me more, that facilitates the choice. And we talked about business ethics. There was one guy in the early 1980s in Quebec. There was a lot of people who became Christians in Quebec at that time. There were a lot of efforts done by missionaries coming in, and the Spirit worked in the heart of many people. One of the guy, he was a mechanic, grade 12, working in a garage for many years. And what he was doing, he was changing the odometer. If it was 100,000 miles, his boss told him, you put 50,000 miles and whistle the car. So that was what he was doing. And so this guy became Christian. And for him, it became very obvious. Nobody has to push him. Hey, you need to stop doing that. It was obvious. The Spirit really opened his eyes. And he said, oh, that's not fair. I cannot do that. He went to his boss and said, I cannot do that anymore. The guy has children at home, only revenue in the household. And the boss said, oh, no, you always did that. Why you didn't do that today, and why do you want to stop? So we explained him to his boss. Well, before, I didn't know Jesus, and now I realize it's not fair. It's not just to do that. I'm convinced that it's not something that we should do. And then he shared the gospel with his boss. So his boss didn't fire him right away, because you cannot fire a guy because he wanted to do the right thing. So it would have put the boss in a very bad position, but he gave him another position that he knew was not going to last for very long. So finally, he fired the guy, and the guy lost his job because of that. Can you imagine? He lost his job because of his faith. How ready are we to pay the cost today? And so how are we as individuals, yes, but also as a church, ready to face those situations? The guy was there, grade 12, didn't have any theology. That was just one thing. I cannot do that. It's not right. He didn't study very long. And then the church was there to help him during those months, because the guy was a worker. He was not sitting there and idle and waiting for something to fall from the sky. He was looking for a job and everything, and the church was supporting him along those times, those difficult times. Imagine what that family experienced. And his hardship in a broken world was an opportunity to share the gospel to a guy he would have never shared otherwise. I'm sure if he had gone to his boss and said, do you want to go at a coffee shop, and then I want to share the gospel with you. Well, that would be great. That's how I like to share the gospel, in a coffee shop with a nice music. But things don't happen like that. This guy paid a cost, and still, to as far as I know, still walking with the Lord. But the example it gave to the family, a way to share the gospel in a broken world, that can be costly. And how are we prepared as a church for these type of things? That will probably happen increasingly, but that's just my opinion. I may be wrong, but with all the things going on in the workplaces today, it's something that may happen. So, next slide. Work after the fall. This one, sorry. Hope remains. Don't hope in me tonight. It's not going well with the slides. Don't trust me with this. But hope remains despite the fall. And it's interesting that God said to the woman, childbearing will be more painful, but your offspring will crush the head of the serpent. And he said to the man, getting food will be harder. Your work you're gonna sweat, but you will still have food. Hope remained despite the broken world. God could have just stopped everything and you guys will starve to death because you don't know how to make bread anyway, and you're just used to pick up vegetables and fruits hanging around, and And so, despite that, hope remains in this broken world, and God still wants to use work. It's not hardships and pains that will prevent him from displaying his compassion, his grace, and his salvation. The mandate of mankind remains, because I asked a question after the fall, is the mandate still the same? Multiply, fill the earth. And yes, it is. After the flood, God told Noah and his son to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. It's still there. It's maybe counterintuitive for us. Now that sin is there, let's stop reproduce. But for God, fill the earth, multiply. So it's asking us to trust in God's wisdom, basically. Because on my wisdom, I wouldn't do that. But if God is saying that, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth to Noah and his sons in this world, well, he knows what he's doing more than I, of course. The last bullet points in this slide is moving from a narrow view to the big picture. If I change the diapers, I remember we had 3 children, and they were all, not one was 3 years old. They were very close to each other. And so we were in the diapers like a lot. And we were changing that. And in my little narrow view of things was that it will never end. It's like I thought that was long time, you know, when 1 year at that time was very long. And someone told me, well, in 5 years probably it's going to be over. Yeah, okay, I forgot that. Okay, time will pass. But the idea here is that I was focused on those diapers. And I forgot that I was basically preparing someone, keeping that person safe and clean and with the hygiene that is needed to prepare that person to become an adult one day. That will hopefully contribute to the society or the community where that person will be. And so moving from a narrow view, the diapers, to serving a purpose in this world. So that was not easy to do at the time, but that's what it is. I'm not doing just that. And it's very interesting. If you read the book from Tim Keller, Every Good Endeavor, he's talking to people who are basically just filling the grocery bags at the grocery store for people, or a janitor, and their vision of their work, they don't think that it's menial work. They see the purpose in this work. All the things they can do, the people they can meet, or this room that they can clean, and there will be a meeting there tomorrow that is important for the boss, and happy to do that. For that person, that was a way to glorify God, a gospel-shaped work. Instead of looking at, oh, what I'm doing is brushing the floor, was more, this will serve to other people and to the company where I serve. And so moving from a narrow view to a greater, or the big picture. There is no menial work. I said that. You can look at Colossians 2 later, Colossians 3 verses 23 to 24, where it says, whatever, he's talking to bondservants, he said, whatever you do in work, do it well, with all your heart, as for the Lord. So it's whatever you do. And he was talking to slaves. He didn't say, slave, get out of there and become a missionary. No, he was encouraging. That's another thing that surprised me. He was encouraging those people to live godly lives in what they were doing. He was not pushing them or asking them something not feasible. Anyway, I found that encouraging. And Paul also encouraged the Thessalonians. Thessalonians, apparently, they had a tendency to slack, because, hey, the Lord is going to come back. Don't need to work, maybe. And Paul said, no, go work with your hands so that you will not depend on other people. Work with your hands. That was very labor work, and most of them were slaves anyway. So that's an encouragement. It's interesting when I think about Jesus. Think about that. He's the Son of God. God with us, walking on two legs. Most of his life was spent working with his hands. The son's carpenter. And the last 3 years, that's where he went for his ministry. Why he didn't start at 16? I don't have the answer to that. But to me, it's amazing to see that if I have a child that is a prodigy, let's say in music or in sports, and I see that, and I said, oh, wait, let's come with me and we're going to work in the garden or do this or do that. We're going to learn how to make maple syrup. And then I keep him all the time away from what it's interesting. I wouldn't do that. I would just push. Hey, we develop that talent. But God in his wisdom worked most of his life as a carpenter. And then he left he went to fulfill his reason to come here after that. But it's interesting that he stayed so long. And another thing also that is encouraging is that Paul is encouraging the Christians to live godly lives. And I mentioned that. I was thinking maybe why he's not pushing them to go become missionaries, become pastors. And what he's saying is, oh, wives, oh, husbands, oh, bondservants, oh, masters. And then he's touching at all these people where they are, encouraging them to live godly lives. So there's a lot of wisdom there, and encouragement for me. Next slide, I'll try not to forget that one. Gospel-shaped work. Refocusing our hope around Jesus. Adam and Eve in the garden, when the serpent came, they were focused on themselves. We can know more. We can experience this. We can know this. Oh. And then they were looking at themselves, and then they went and they sinned. They disobeyed the only command that God gave them. And it's easy for us, especially in our society, to focus our hope on ourselves. And if I think about work, it's to focus on our career. I want to achieve this. I want to be there. I want to grow, climb up the ladder, corporate ladder, or things like that. I may focus on my children, on what I want is a romantic love, or focus on myself, and with keeping in mind, I want to avoid hardship and sufferings as much as possible. Either I stay away from it, I avoid it, or I medicate it, but I don't want to suffer. And so it's not that we need to be masochist. How do you say that in English? Masochist? Okay. But in God's perspective, suffering and pain are part of his plan to make us more like him. And if I don't embrace hardships, sufferings, pains, uncertainties as they are, tools that God is using in this broken world to bring me closer to him, make me more like Jesus, then I will struggle with that. But if I accept hardships and sufferings for what they are, it will help me address things that will happen at work. For example, a conflict. I won't be surprised. And in reality, there's no places where there's no conflict. So when I go to a place, there are conflict. We'll see how God is going to work through that. And sometimes the conflict are difficult to address, or how do we go around that? When we talk to other Christians, we read our Bible, we search for information how to deal with that. There are tools out there. There are Christians who went through many things, especially here. We have people of all ages, people who have done careers for years in what they're doing. There's a lot of experience there. These people have seen a lot of conflicts. Why don't we go to them more easily and just ask for, hey, I'm facing this. What do you think? And I'd like to hear what you have to say on this. So, and an example is in 2 Corinthians 12, chapter 12, verse 9, where, where Paul is talking about his thorns. So he's suffering. It's preventing him from achieving his full potential. It's bringing him down sometimes. And so health-wise, he cannot do all the things he could do. It puts boundaries. And so he asks God, take it away from me. He's like, he just want to go. And God is keeping him not at the pace that he would like to go. And God told him, my grace is sufficient. And I glorified myself in your weaknesses. And then he said, okay. In my limitation, in my weaknesses, in the things I cannot do properly, moving the slides on time and all that, and much more, in all my mistakes and my failures, and the thing I don't succeed in, that's when God can glorify himself. And Paul just embraced it. Okay, life is going to be tough. And I trust that through that, your glory will show up. And how it can show up? Practically, it's things will happen that we would not think we could have happened. And very often, it gives us the opportunity to talk about what Jesus did. It can be to non-believers, or it can be to a believer who needs encouragement at a certain time. And just hearing how we went through and how God was there all the time, it can help. So, glorify his name. All right, next slide. Gospel-shaped work. It's the story of Zacchaeus here. When we encounter Jesus, everything changes. So, Zacchaeus was doing his thing, taking more money than he had to, and then Jesus comes his way, and then it impacts his life forever, and he said, I'm not going to take more money, I'm going to give back fourfold what I've taken too much from people, and his life was impacted. And it doesn't say in the Bible that Jesus asked him to follow him as a disciple, or ask him to leave his job and now become a missionary or someone else. Just an impacted life, and his work became gospel-shaped. Can you imagine the glory there to God that it gave? Imagine you're one of the guy who was fooled by Zacchaeus, and then suddenly knock at your door and said, here's what I've done to you, I'm sorry, I give you 4 times that amount. Wow. Yeah, I met Jesus, and whoa. So it's a gospel-shaped work, basically. And that was that's a good example. And we have, I'm sure each one of you have examples of Christians who share the gospel in their work, and that had an impact. We just had Norton Lagues, I'm not sure my pronunciation is good, but last week, who came on stage and told us that there was a carpenter fixing his kitchen, and he asked Norton, do you feel lost? And look now, just one question, it brought him on a journey that's impactful. That's the gospel. That's our God. It can be powerful way more than we think, above and beyond expectation, like we often hear. And now he's the director of FAIR, and he's helping people around the world. That's how it starts. Maybe just a quick example, another one. Francis Collins, in his work, he was not a believer. He was I'm going to try that in English. I need to read it just to make sure my pronunciation is good. Geriatrician, a doctor, yeah? I see some heads, and thank you very much. Tells me I pronounce it not too bad. So a doctor who's taking care of seniors, and he's there. He's an agnostic, and there's a lady there, one of his patients. She's dying, a few days more, that's it. And she asked him the question, do you believe in God? And he knew she was Christian, but that's the question he asked him. And he said, I don't know. And then after he went back home and said, wait a minute, I studied all these years, I have all these diplomas, and I have all this knowledge, and I cannot answer that question. And so it put him on a search of, I need to answer that question. And it took quite a while, but he became a Christian. And after that, he became the director of the Human Genome Project. For those of you who heard about that, it lasts 13 years. He's the one who wrote the part of the speech of Bill Clinton on the discovery, because that was announced by Bill Clinton. We've completed the project. It was supposed to last many decades, and it lasted only 13 years. Bill Clinton did the speech. You can see that on YouTube. It says that he says, we found the language of God. And that's Francis Collins who wrote that. And he has a book on this. And anyway, so one question sometimes in the workplace can change the life of someone. And the lady never knew about all these things. She died a few days later. He was not a Christian. And look at what happened. We need to ask questions to the people around us. We need to have the courage to be judged. We will be judged anyway. Whether we do something or not, people will judge us. So why not ask questions to those who do not know the Lord? We never know what can happen. Another example is a teacher in Ontario. She was at her school, and one day they had a flag, a ceremony. The LGBTQ plus flag was put up, and they asked her. They asked all the teachers to come and for that ceremony, and she was not comfortable, and she went to see her supervisor and said, "Listen, I fully support the values of our country, the flag that we have in front of our school, which are kindness, respect, integrity, and this I have these values, and I will respect people who have different sexual orientation than I and things like that, but I cannot support the values and go to the ceremony of the flag." And so she didn't go, but she explained to the supervisor, and the supervisor understood. And surprisingly, very few people went to the ceremony for various reasons. But it was a risky decision to make. But that was one way of saying, look, I respect, but I don't agree. And I think we need to do that more in our society. Respect without necessarily agreeing, right? These are basic Canadian values, respect and kindness. So that was another example I wanted to bring, that sometimes we are in a situation that I would like to be away, or maybe I will call for a sick day. There's a ceremony thing. And no, I will just face reality as it is. It's a broken world. I am a Christian. I'm going to just surrender and whatever happens. So, Jeremiah, we're going to turn there. Jeremiah chapter 29. It's okay so far. I'm not asking you to turn too often, eh? We're not flipping page that much. Jeremiah 29. Jeremiah 29. We will read verse 4 to... Oh, my slide. Thank you, Marie. Here we go. Jeremiah 29, verse 4 to 7. Israel is in exile. They are in Babylon. A part of Judah is in exile in Babylon. Jeremiah is still in Jerusalem with most of the people from Judah, but he's writing a letter to those in Babylon who have been exiled there. And starting with verse 4, it says this: Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses, what? And live in them. Plant gardens. See gardens? It's amazing how it's everywhere in the Bible. Plant gardens and eat their produce. It's basically saying them, settle there. That's where you will be for a while. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons. So it's not just we're not just here for 2 days. And give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease. They are in a broken world, and look at God, what He's asking. Verse 7, but seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. It's basically saying, God, hope and work for Babylon's success. What? That's our God. So we are exiles, sojourners on the earth. Where is bringing us? It's a very good principle we have here. We're not Judah. We're not in exile in Babylon. Yes, I get that. But that's a good example. Where you are, seek the welfare of that place. Get involved in your community. Be a gospel-shaped person in that environment, even though sometimes we just want to be away. We just want to close our eyes. I don't want to get there. It's not nice. And it's a good example of not focusing on ourselves, but focusing on the cause of God, the kingdom He's building. And we can just look around here, what in Charlottetown we can do as a church. As an individual, yes, but as a church also. Let's ask both questions. What can I do to improve this community? What are the needs? And it can just start by a discussion with leaders in city council or elsewhere. What are the needs that are not answered and that are urgent at the moment? We as a church would like to contribute, and we want to see what we can do. And then initiate a discussion. Maybe there will be nothing. Maybe it will take 2 years, 3 years, but at least there's someone in his office who will see a Christian coming in. And we never know what can happen. And so that's just an example in our little area where we are. How can we help and contribute to the success of the community where we are? Tim Keller in his book, still, Every Good Endeavor, if you want to read a good book, whether you're retired or not, it doesn't matter. It's very good. He says in New York, years ago when we started his ministry at Redeemer, there were places in the city that were violent, not safe in terms of buildings and infrastructure and physical things. There were also a lot of needs in terms of schools, quality of schools and hospitals. And so those things were addressed over the years. And now in an area where things were very ugly or like burned, and now there are nice paintings on the walls and things like that. And he said, there are 2 communities who did that and made a lot of impacts on the city of New York. The Jewish, who built schools and hospitals to give access to healthcare, and the LGBTQ plus community who did the hard works and all these things to embellish, I don't know if it's a good word, but to make it more beautiful and livable. And so he said, I scratched my head and said, where are the Christians? Where are we in this? So it's a good question that I ask myself and that we need to ask ourselves too, I think. Where is our contribution in the broken world where we are? Next slide. Am I on the next slide now? Yep. Business, last two slides. So this is one slide, it's about business. If you have a business and you wonder, is God care about business, like making profit thing and producing goods and services for others, and you're looking for a verse in the Bible, you won't find a verse that says business, the corporate world, or whatever. If you will have a thin thread of verses from which you can build a theology of business. However, we need to look at the big narrative, the grand narrative on that. And here I give a few examples. Producing goods from raw material processing. When you take raw material and you produce good out of it, that's kind of an industry you're doing. You need a supply, you need a processing, and you need a client at the end, if we take business terms, okay? So an example, well, let's go back to Genesis 3, verse 19. Genesis 3, verse 19. God has this gift to declare things that sometimes we have no idea what he means. For Adam and Eve, when God said that, probably they were scratching their heads. What does that mean? Genesis chapter 3, verse 19. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. That's very positive. Have a good day. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread. Bread. We have a garden, fruits, vegetable. What is bread? And then here it's not the flour and the yeast and all that. It's more food in general, but food that is produced from these raw materials. So it takes work to get there. Okay? And other verses I found interesting in Numbers. Yes, there are interesting verses in Numbers. Chapter 7, verse 12. Numbers 7, verse 12. That was the consecration of the tabernacle. Each tribe has to bring a few supplies and furnitures, not furnitures, but tools and things like that, gifts. Every day, one tribe, another day, another tribe. Okay, we won't go through the 12 tribes because they all bring the same thing. But we're going to go at what they bring. Numbers chapter 7, verse 12. He who offered his offering the first day was Nahshon, the son of Amminadab, of the tribe of Judah. And his offering was 1 silver plate. 1 silver plate. Silver is not something you go out and you look in your backyard, oh, there's silver. It takes a lot of work to get to silver. Yeah, mining or digging, and then crushing, and then heating, and then sifting, and then extracting, concentrating. It's a lot of tools that it takes, and at that time, technologies. So, to build that, you build kind of you're building an industry. It doesn't happen. It's not one person who does all that. So 1 silver plate whose weight was 130 shekels. You have this. 1 silver basin of 70 shekels according to the shekel of the sanctuary. Both of them full of what? The bowls are full of fine flour. Do you have an idea how to get to a flour? How much work there is there? Think about that. You go in a field here, a field of wheat, or to be more PI, barley, and you see barley or wheat, and you see the grain. Well, first of all, you don't see the grain. You see hulls and stacks and all that. And so you remove the hull, and you have the grain. You crack the grain, and it's white inside. Before you start thinking that, oh, you can crush that thing, and you can sift it, and grind it, and sift it again, and grind it, and sift and grind to get the fine flour. Who thought about that? It's like the first person who think that a lobster could be eaten. Must have been starving to death. But you go around, you see a grain, a wheat. Between a wheat grain and flour, there's quite a difference there. So it's a lot of processing. One person cannot do all these things. You start involving people and technologies, and you need tools for that. And the fine flour was mixed with oil. Most of the oil comes from plants. This one from olive, probably. At that time, olive was the first source of oil. You take an olive and you think about, oh yeah, I'm going to get oil out of it. So there must have been a lot of trials and errors, and then, oh, we have the oil. And then we can burn this. We can have light, or we can mix it and have cake, or there's a lot of ingenuity there. So from something, a raw material, things are built up. So you see the idea of processing and building an industry. You need supplies, you need technologies to transform that, and you need buyers at the end, or trade at the time. I'll give you the oil, you give me the flour, and I'll give you the silver, you give me the gold, that's how it started. So when we look at the different things, different places in the Bible, we can see that there is, behind those things that we read very quickly, there's a lot of work. There's something being built behind. And the purpose of businesses is really that, supplying goods and services. In this case, wine flour and oil were goods, but they were services also. Think about, and that's the other point, offering services, public or corporate, to meet the needs of others. Think about the first one I'm thinking is Abraham in Genesis, when Lot was taken away. Abraham took his best soldiers, his army, and went after these guys to deliver his ally. So he took his army as a service for the good of others. Hey, you don't capture our family, sorry, but then he went. His army was for a service, not to conquer necessarily all the people around. And Abraham at that time had the promise, you see all around, you will have it. He could have taken his army and just go to war against everybody around. He didn't do that. But when Lot was taken away, he went after to protect, to deliver him. So that's one of the service we see. But we see also Joseph serving the Pharaoh as the Ministry of Agriculture, we would call today. He was managing the fields and the crops and making sure we can store grains and have enough when the starvation period will come, when the drought will come. And Daniel also. Daniel, the king, put him in charge of the province of Babylon, and he asked, my friend, can they have also positions in the government? They came in and served for the affairs of the king in Babylon, in the province of Babylon. So we see people working for the government there. And so that's another service for the good of others there. And the last slide, how am I doing on time, Jeff? Is it good? Okay, well, I have 1 minute. The last slide is basically comparing a worldly perspective to a godly perspective. It comes from the book Business Matters to God. Even if you don't have a business, I encourage you to read this. Business Matters to God. It's a very good book. I did that with my son when he was studying in business, and he said it shapes the way he's doing business, and it changed also my perspective. Very good. He gives conferences at Redeemer Church in New York and other places. You can find him on YouTube as well. But Here we compare two things, worldly perspective, godly perspective of business. In business, if I have a worldly perspective, one of the questions I will ask is, how can I maximize my return on investment, ROE, or ROI? And so here I have my shares. How many percentage? How much money I can make within this period of time? And that will be my focus. Okay. A godly perspective to that is more like it's written there. Given the core competency of my organization, and the assets under my control, how can I best direct the organization to serve and enable my community to flourish? An example of that, Delta Airlines during COVID. When COVID hit, the airline companies, most of them fired their employees. That was, we want to minimize our loss because maximizing return on investment is our priority. Therefore, we fire our employees. We put our planes to the ground. We don't fly anymore. That's it. Delta Airlines, the CEO went to the board and said, brace yourself, we're going to lose money for the next few years. But that pandemic will not last forever. When it comes back to normal, we'll be ready. And so they kept most of their employees, keeping the airplanes to fly, and they focused on the safety of the passengers. When you went to Delta Airlines, you needed to have a mask and keep your social distance and all that. That was very strict. You couldn't get on the plane if you didn't have that, and if you were on the plane and start misbehaving, you wouldn't fly with Delta Airlines after that. So when you went to Delta Airlines, they were there operating, flying around even with empty planes, and keeping their mechanics, their pilots, their flight attendants, and everything was moving. They were losing money, but they were keeping their people. And for passengers, you knew that when you went to Delta Airlines, you would be safe. And so when the pandemic started to end, they were ready, and everything was there ready to go. So that's an example. Last thing here, worldly perspective, cost-benefit analysis. That drives everything. Cost-benefit analysis, okay, but without biblical ethics can be destructive. Think about the Pinto scandal. You heard about that maybe in the 1970s. They had a problem with the tank, the fuel tank. When there were rear-end collisions, very often there was a fire and people died because they were burned to death in their car. A very simple collision, doesn't have to be a big thing. So Ford, and it's a well-known story, it's all in a lot of business books, you must have seen that, Scott. A lot of, what happened, Ford looked at, okay, if I fix the problem, it's going to cost me $137 million at the time. But if I pay for damages, when people sue our company or whatever, want damages, it's going to cost us $11 million. So we will leave the problem as it is, because the cost-benefit analysis told the company that if you fix the problem, it's going to be more expensive than if you do nothing, and that people sometimes burn to death. So a biblical perspective will look at the cost-benefit, of course, but bring a biblical angle to that and say, I'm not just here to add profit, but I'm here also to restore, a restorative perspective. So that's the exercise we need to do. These are just a few examples of questions, worldly perspective versus godly perspective. And I often have to scratch my head because it's easy for me to come with the worldly perspective, but to develop the biblical one, because situations are often new, I've never been confronted to that or faced with this situation, I need to think twice before I can develop that biblical perspective. So I took too much of your time. I want to thank you for listening. I guess now it's a question period. Do I have to stay here, Mike, or can I go down?